friend of mine who runs the Montgomery County Tea Party, and she asked me about 4 months ago to interview for an hour in front of 1,000 people one Donald Trump. I had no idea who Donald Trump was, other than seeing his buildings occasionally in different cities. Never watched his television program, had no idea who he was. But she kept insisting that I interview this guy in front of 1,000 people at the Woodlands High School, so I said, well, if I'm going to do this, I better be prepared. So I started to, I told my son James, I understood he had a couple of books, I said, buy me all of his books. Well, they get 12 New York Times bestsellers, not bad. One of the people I really like is Billie Jean King. She was one of the founders of the women's movement. She also, one of the greatest tennis players of all time, started the WTA, the Women's Tennis Association over here at the Houston Racket Club 40, 50 years ago. Billie Jean King, one of her favorite sayings is be accomplished and famous. So I started studying this guy named Donald Trump, seeing if he was accomplished and not just famous like the Kardashians. They're famous, but they're not accomplished. Yeah. So I found out that Donald Trump's father built rent-controlled apartments in New York City. Yep. It's tough to make money off rent-controlled apartments because by definition you can't raise the rent. But his father was a very good operator. So throughout his childhood, he'd be on the ground and on the living room floor playing with his blocks or toys or whatever, and his father would be negotiating on the phone with a plumber, an electrician, a contractor, a drywall person or something. And so Donald Trump learned how to negotiate from watching his father for umpteen years. And then Donald Trump went to Wharton Business School, which is one of the premier business schools in the country, and he did fairly well there and went on to lots of success, obviously, as you know, in the real estate business, in your business. Donald Trump is very accomplished. He's written not one, not two, but 12 New York Times bestsellers. Pretty impressive if you ask me. Including the best-selling business book of all time, The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump. Donald Trump developed the high-end condominium market in New York City. He developed it. It was never there before he started it. He sells condominiums in New York City for $30 and $40 million each. Wow. Each. That's what Donald Trump did. Donald Trump in the early 1990s was broke. And the real estate market in New York City had gone from boom to bust. And about 15 of his closest friends, real estate developers, the banks had pulled the plug on him and repossessed all their properties, and they were fixing to do it to him. So he'd been arguing with these bankers for 3 weeks, 12, 14 hours a day, and he was exhausted from doing this, trying to get them to renegotiate his loan so he could stay afloat. And I think one Tuesday afternoon he told me it was he couldn't do it anymore, and he went home like 4 o'clock that afternoon. And his secretary told him, you know, they're having a bankers convention tonight at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, and they're expecting you there. He said, I just can't do it. All those bankers hate me. I owe them so much money, I'm not going to go. So he got home, and his secretary called him again and said, you know, you got to go to this bankers thing. He said, well, I really have to go. She said, yeah. She said, and by the way, don't take the limousine. You're broke. So he said he put on his tuxedo and he went out to hail a cab, and it was snowing and raining in New York City in January. Couldn't get a cab, and he walked 10 blocks to the hotel, and he was wet like a dog when he got to the hotel, cold and miserable. And he sat down at the table where he was sitting, and the guy on his left was real nice to him. And it didn't take him long to figure out that the guy on his left was nice to him because Trump didn't owe him any money. And the guy on the right wouldn't say a word to him because he owed the guy on his right, he owed him like $100 million or something. And the guy on his right had a reputation of being a killer, somebody that would put all these people out of business. You know, the guy on the right was really a brutal guy. So Trump kept working the guy and working him, trying to get him to talk to him, and the guy wouldn't talk to him about anything. And finally he hit on a subject that was the guy's favorite subject, and him and the guy started talking and talking and talking. At the end of the night, the guy says, you know, you're not such a bad guy after all. Come by Monday, we'll work this deal out. And that saved his career. Donald Trump said the greatest insurance policy ever, this is one to take home, worth listening to me. The greatest insurance policy ever to take home is this: never give up. That is the story of Winston Churchill's life, and that is the story of Donald Trump's life. Never give up on yourself, on your dreams, on your customers, on whatever is important to you. Never give up. He told me he was walking down the streets of New York City and there was a beggar on the street with a tin cup and they were putting dollars in there and change. And he said to his wife, he said, you know, that beggar there is worth $2 billion more than I am. She said, how's that possible? She said, all he's got is those few dollars and pennies and nickels and quarters in that cup. He said, well, he's got that. I owe $2.5 billion. And at the height of being broke, there was a 50-story building on Wall Street in New York City that came available, been totally mismanaged by these several different people that had it. And it was a terrible building, had a terrible reputation. And it came up where he could buy that building for $1 million. So he went out and tried to get partners to buy the building with him, and nobody wanted anything to do with Donald Trump. He bought the building himself, even though he didn't have money. He scraped up the money and bought the building himself for $1 million. He's turned down $650 million for the building. Donald Trump, the accomplice and then famous. So we had this meeting at this fancy country club where the pre-meeting with Donald Trump. And the guy walked in, he looked at me, he found out who I was. He said, what am I here for? That's what he said. He said, what am I here for? I told him what he was here for. He said, oh, I get it now. He said, by the way, you got an hour and a half of great energy for me. He said, after that, I'm done. He said, I can give you an hour and a half, all I got. And you know, the amazing thing was, he didn't have a cell phone. He didn't have a pager. He had 4 or 5 handlers around him that just stood in the corner. But he was totally in the present during that time he was there. He had no distractions. He was totally in the present. When it came time to go, they grabbed him and walked him out. He said, I got to see y'all, I got to go. It was brilliant. He was totally in the present. And he's looking around this country club and he said, you know, he says, why is this country club, the road's all torn up coming into it? He noticed it on the drive-in. He looked around the building and found 5 or 6 things wrong with the building. He said, why is all this, that? And somebody said they're having a little financial problems at the country club. He said, who built the golf course? They're giving the guy's name into it. He's a friend of mine, blah, blah, blah. He said, I know more about this clubhouse than the manager does. That's how attuned to detail the guy was. He didn't get to where he wanted to be. Like his political affiliation or not, doesn't matter. He didn't get to where he wanted to be by being a dummy. He is accomplished and famous, and he works harder than anybody else. When that hour and a half was over, he got on the plane, went to Las Vegas to do another speech. Amazing guy. But, you know, the story of Donald Trump is the story of persistence. The story of Donald Trump is the story of dreaming big. His father built rent-controlled apartments in New York City. He sells $40 million condominiums. Amazing, isn't it? He's also the best golf course designer in the world. And he had that television show for 10 years called The Apprentice. It was the #1 show on television. That never, a business show on primetime television that never worked. They all told him not to do it. He said, I'm going to do it. And you know how much money he made from that television show that he gave up to run for president of the United States? $3 million a week. Not bad. The power of belief. You got to believe in yourself. You got to believe in what you're doing. And the other thing he told me was you got to learn everything you can about what you're doing, and then learn every day, because somebody's always trying to leapfrog past you. You got to learn, and you got to be desirous of learning every single day. You got to learn to earn. You got to learn to earn. You got to get up earlier than the other guy, stay later. And so I was amazed by this guy, how much energy he had, and how knowledgeable he was about that real estate stuff. But that's why he's successful. And the other thing, his credo is never give up. His other credo is, you know, you've got to be tough in negotiations. He's a tough negotiator. But he learned that from being a New York City street guy. You've got to be a tough negotiator. That's Donald Trump. So my advice is, what I learned from Donald Trump, never give up. Learn everything you can about the business that you're in every single day, and go out there and network with people, and get an association, make friends with people, and do business with people who want to do business with you, and dream big, because that's what Donald Trump does. That's what we try to do at Gallery Furniture, is reinvent the furniture business every single day. I know that when we started here, we had 20 competitors in this town 33 years ago. Now there's 500 competitors, there's 10,000 internet sites. We better do something different every day. My final question about Donald Trump is, to all of us, what have we done for our customers today that's hashtag remarkable? What have we done for our customers today that's hashtag remarkable? That means they're going to remark about it to their friends tomorrow. When you see that incredible Trump Tower and all that gleaming stuff, it's remarkable and people talk about it. Or his golf courses, or his this or that, they talk about it because it's remarkable, because he makes them better than first class. What are we going to do to give our customers remarkable service? So they'll remark too about their friends. Then the business will grow. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you.